Okay, so I'm getting ready to wire up the heater section, and I always start with the heater section because it is the lowest in the chassis. So once the heater is in, then I can go and do the AC, which is going to be on this side. It's going to run right here. But I'm doing this backwards of how I normally do it because normally I do everything from left to right if I can, and then I mark it on, I don't know if you can see these little highlighter marks. As I go, I mark it on my schematic so that I know what I've done. But I want to get this board that we worked on a little bit already. I want to get this wired into this. And before I can start layering this board, I got to do all the wiring that goes underneath. So that's going to be the heater and the AC. So I'm going to wire this up, show you what it looks like, and then we'll get back into it. Okay, here is our completed heated circuit. And what I did is, you see, I twisted here. I don't know if you can see, but I always try to do a 90-degree angle up if you're going to move it, but keep the heater circuit as close to ground as possible. Here's where it gets a little wonky because we got this return back to the transformer. It's kind of by itself, and it's got to go along this resistor. But once I made the return back, I twisted it up again, and it looks like a pretty tight circuit. So I think that's going to work. That's how I'm going to do it. And this goes to the transformer, which is the very last thing we mount to the chassis. All right, the AC or input section, let's go. So this is going to be our breaker. I normally don't use breakers, I use fuses, but I just wanted to try this. So when I wire this, I'm going to have it so that it's not hooked up into the chassis, so I can pull it in and out as needed for room, but I think it's going to be pretty good. What I like to do with the ground needs its own separate ground to the chassis. I'm going to put that right there. What I like to do is I just like to put a little bit of solder on the wire, make it strong, and then I hook it up with a lock washer and a nut and bolt it there. I like these extra long screws because I can put the strain relief to this, and later on that's going to hold this. But for right now I'm going to leave the strain relief off so we can get to everything else. But I'll show you what that looks like. The only other things I would mention are, so this is the wire that is going to hook up to our on-off switch, which is on the back of the volume knob. And you have to make sure that if you're using, in this case, 14 gauge, this has to be 14 gauge as well. Otherwise you will build up resistance and heat, and it will affect your circuit. So like size wires. And then I'll show you what that looks like when it's all wired in, but this is going to go to the bottom here, and then I'll wire up the top part of this breaker right to the switch, which has to go over here. And we're going to route it in this corner where it's away from everything and closest to ground. So that's my plan of attack. All right, I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, so here's what it looks like. I did say that I was going to connect this black wire to this bottom terminal, but I actually had that backwards. So I put this to the top. This goes in from the power cord to the breaker, out the breaker, into this switch, out from the switch, and back into this, which will get wired into the transformer along with the white wire here, which goes through here. I try to braid as much AC as I can, keep noise down, but as you can see, what I've done is I routed it to the bottom. Like I said, I want to keep this away from the circuit as much as possible to the bottom. And for now, I'm just going to leave this unattached as well as the breaker so I can move it and get this stuff. So you can see the ground here is attached, and also I have enough room to put this strain relief, which is going to hold this bad boy right to that when everything's all said and done with. Actually, it's gonna hold it more at an angle, but I can't really get it without the strain relief. But it'll keep everything away, and it looks pretty nice and neat, and we'll have a stable ground. All right, the next thing we're gonna do is wire up the output, and that goes here, or not the output, I'm sorry, the input for the guitar, and that goes right here, and then I'll show you what that looks like. So here is what the input looks like. One thing I should mention is when I made the schematic, I actually mirrored this from what it's supposed to be. So originally I had intended for 1, 2, 3 to be the first where the input goes, but it's actually on the other side. So this is now going to pin number 7 instead of pin number 2. And I'll have to correct that on the schematic before we move forward. But here's what the output looks like, all wired. So if you look here, this is the ground lug here, and this is the switch. And I have the grid resistor hooked up into the switch and then the ground. And all that's doing is connecting the switch to the ground. It'll still make to the ground. So what happens is, since this switch, which I'll show you here, is grounded, this is the switch, this little piece of metal right in here. When you put the tip of the jack in, it pushes this down. I can get my big old fat finger out of the way. And then it's disconnected from ground, and that's all that switch does. So when there's no jack in there, it doesn't make any noise. And how you tell which one goes to which, you can just follow. So here's a tip jack, you can follow that here, and it's gonna be the very last lug over here, which is where the 68K is. And that's about it. All right, on to the circuit board. So this is the same circuit board we worked on last time. I've added the ground wire in. This is what it's going to look like. And I drilled some holes where the wires are going to connect from the components, which are here, to the tube sockets. So what I'm going to do is this circuit board actually, I got it messed up. Let's put it in there, right? So it's going to sit like this, right about there. So what we have to do is, because the ground's over here, is we have to make this so our wires are long enough that our board, here, let me zoom out so you can see what I'm talking about here. So we have to make this so the board sits in here, but if we need to do any work, the board has to be able to flip up so we can get underneath there, so we don't have to desolder any connections. So we got to make some really neat connections to our tube sockets here. But I'm going to put in the wires, and I'm going to show you what that all looks like. All right. Okay. So as you can see, I've connected everything. I made my leads so they're long enough when this is in here, when they do get connected, that I'll be able to lift this up. It'll look something like that. And so what I did is I alternated the colors. So this is a cathode resistor, and it's going to go to the triode on this side, since it's white. This is another cathode resistor. This is gonna go to this side. so I'll be able to doubly tell them apart. But what I like to do when I'm putting these together is I just do one wire at a time. I kind of gauge, I hold it, I gauge how long the wire is going to be, cut it, pull it through, solder it, clip it, move on to the next one. That way it doesn't get so confusing to this guy, but you do it however you want to. And next thing we're going to do is we are going to, here, let me grab this here. We are going to connect these guys to their respective tube sockets. And then we're going to wire in this. Last thing we're going to do is wire in the ground. And then once that's done, we'll tighten it up and we'll put in the transformers, which you can see get it wired up here, and we'll bring in the anodes last, or the tube caps. All right, well, that's all the time I got. So I hope you enjoyed. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. If you got any comments, I take them all, good, bad, ugly, whatever. All right, have a great day, and thanks for watching.